Montessori can mean lots of things. The Montessori method, Dr. Montessori herself, a philosophy of parenting, philosophy for teaching, a philosophy for life, the materials that we use in the classroom. This is a really complicated philosophy, and it's far more than just a curricular package. In brief, Montessori is a philosophy of education that believes that children are born with certain intrinsic qualities, and that if we protect those qualities and support them throughout children's lives in carefully prepared, responsive environments, they'll persist into adulthood and ultimately change our society for the better. But specifically, what about all those special words? Here's a cheat sheet for Montessori terms. The Montessori method is a model of education. It's comprised of multi-age classrooms that are matched to meet the specific needs of the children's development in those classrooms, within which teachers practice the norms of scientific inquiry to prepare materials, prepare lessons, and to make sure that they're being responsive to the observed, evidence-based developmental needs of the individual child. Montessori as a philosophy expands beyond the classroom to include parenting, social structures, community engagement, all the other factors that influence how children and individuals and groups interact. It presumes that children are born good, intrinsically motivated to learn, and intrinsically motivated to contribute in meaningful ways to the communities that are around them. Freedom with limits is a guiding principle of both the method and the philosophy, describing that balance between personal choice and social responsibility that's instilled through Montessori practice. One's own freedoms are limited by their influence on other people in the space. In the classroom, you'll see this principle influence how many materials are on the shelf, the expectations for children's behavior, the kind of language that teachers use, even lesson design. The Society by Cohesion, or the Society of New Children, describes the social structure that we believe is preserved through Montessori, in which children come to rely on each other for the functioning of their classroom. They increase their own agency as meaningful contributors to the micro-society that's inside of those classroom communities. And they increase their awareness of the interdependence of all learners. Montessori classrooms that model this structure are non-competitive. They allow for each child to progress at their own pace without pitting learners against each other. The prepared environment describes the physical, social, emotional, intellectual space of the Montessori classroom or the Montessori home, within which design elements prioritize the development of the individual learners there, and they're crafted based on what we actually see when we observe children in those spaces. The prepared environment is prepared to provide learners with full agency over their learning as they practice independence, concentration, coordination, and order, generally in the mastery of content across 5 primary areas of the classroom: practical life, sensorial, math, language, and the cultural materials. The Montessori materials are those concrete manipulatives that are available in most Montessori schools. Montessori materials all share certain qualities. They're beautiful, they're simple, they're self-correcting, they're didactic, and they're usually focused on just one single concept to master. They're presented on the shelf from left to right and from top to bottom, from the easiest material to the most complicated, in the same pattern that language follows. Some of these materials are universal. You'll see them in every Montessori school you enter: the pink tower, the broad stair, the number rods, the golden beads, movable alphabet, and others. Others may be designed by classroom teachers to meet the needs of the specific children that are in that classroom at that time. 3-part cards, the practical life materials, the cultural materials. In either scenario, they share all of those same features. They're self-correcting, simple, and elegant in design. The role of the adult refers to the special responsibilities that Montessori teachers often apply to their work. Montessori teachers define their work through 3 primary roles: the teacher as scientist, teacher as servant, and the teacher as saint. As scientists, Montessori teachers analyze their classrooms after careful, unbiased, systemic observations to determine the specific needs of the individual children there and the larger shared needs of the whole community. As servants, Montessori teachers design the space to reflect those observations, to prepare the environment for the children to engage. As saints, Montessori teachers strive to model the kind of respectful and collaborative learning that we seek to protect in the children. Montessori teachers will often quote Dr. Montessori's original guidance. The greatest success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as though I didn't exist. In visiting Montessori classrooms, it's often hard to find the teacher at first. Unlike traditional rooms where the teacher may be at the front of the classroom or instructing all of the children at once, Montessori teachers, sometimes we call them guides, sometimes we call them directors, they're likely to be on the floor with a small group of children or an individual child, or even someplace observing the classroom from afar, focused on a single lesson rather than standing at the center of attention. Maria Montessori founded the Montessori method in the first decade of the 20th century, over 100 years ago, and after years of study as a medical doctor and research in institutions across Italy. As one of Italy's first female physicians, Montessori was a woman of great personal strength and courage. And while her initial work focused on the educative benefits of the method, she ultimately came to recognize that children in these settings were not only able to learn content that others might have thought was too advanced for them, but that they did so while maintaining their peaceful dispositions, their collaborative and non-competitive nature, and that motivation to learn. In the years that followed World War II, more schools across the world adopted her method, and Montessori lectured still on the academic benefits, but expanded her lens to address the potential for world peace that we believe would come from a change in teaching and parenting. Ultimately, Montessori saw herself and the children in the classrooms that bear her name as children of the world, unfettered by the political boundaries that we may have created, but committed to a peaceful future through education. Even as her legacy grew, Montessori did not prefer that classrooms carry her name, and argued instead that her method was better described as some sort of a pedagogical anthropology. We're kind of happy that that name didn't stick.